Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Joining us, Scott Allen of the Washington Post, of course, the DC Sports Blog. And Scott, technically your beat on all the local media types of things. And we get the news today that we've known is coming for a long time. NBC Sports Washington is going to rebrand as Monumental Sports Network. This was always coming after Ted Leonsis bought it. But ultimately, through your eyes, what does this mean?
Yeah, good to be here, Craig. No real surprises today, I would say. I mean, as you mentioned, ever since Ted purchased the remaining control of NBC Sports Washington last August, they said a rebrand was coming. They said an investment in the network was coming. And today, I guess we finally get to see some of the details of what that will look like, because we basically went through last Capitals and Wizards season with things looking pretty much the same, both on the NBC Sports Washington website, on the broadcasts. Today we get the new name, which is really kind of an old name because it's what the digital platform for Monumental Sports and Entertainment was called when it launched in 2016. But I think there are some exciting elements in there, both to the live game broadcast where we're talking more mic'd up players and coaches, new camera angles, and then something that the network has been lacking in recent years in terms of original programming. So magazine-style shows about the Caps and Wizards, a countdown show, airing of classic Wizards, Capitals, and Mystics games and such, and a new, maybe the highlight of it all, the biggest name anyway, a new interview series hosted by Potomac, Maryland's Rachel Nichols.
Yeah, I thought there was a great quote in your story where I think it was Zach Leonsis said, I tell my staff I don't want air fryer commercials in the middle of the day anymore, which, I feel like for the previous times we've had you on the show, an air fryer commercial is something we possibly could have discussed during a segment.
Absolutely. Before I talked to Zach about this, I actually turned on NBC Sports Washington to see what was airing at noon on a random weekday. And no joke, it was some program called the Larry King Prostate Report. So for him to then make that air fryer joke, I was like, yeah, there's a lot of junk filling the airwaves on that channel outside of game coverage. So I think that's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, Scott Allen, Washington Post with us. So from where I sit, this is big time positive, big time negative type of thing. And I think that the investment they're making is incredible. I think as a consumer of the game, you ultimately want like the best product. The fact that the sideline reporters are going to always be there, these mic'd up segments, the kind of access is incredible. It's the kind of stuff you dream of having as a consumer. There's also, for lack of a better way to put it, the state media element of it. How much do you think the fact that the team owner is the same as the network owner truly affects the coverage? Forget being critical of roster moves and stuff. When we keep it in the box of the game. Like how free do you feel like the NBC Sports Washington, soon to be Monumental Sports talent is to, be real if there's poor performances, especially in light of the fact that the Wizards are probably not going to be good for a while?
Yeah. I think that's going to be one of the more interesting things to watch going forward, because it's a question people have been raising since Ted bought 1/3 of, I think, what was then Comcast Sportsnet or NBC Sports Washington back in 2016. I think if come January and the Wizards are 30 games under 500 and everything's, flowers and rainbows on the game broadcast with, Chris Miller talking about the team, that can and should be, called out and made fun of. It won't be, I don't think, by Monumental Sports Network employees, but I think that's absolutely something to watch. I think traditionally, even for, I think TV broadcasts, teams that have relationships with these networks, even if they're not wholly owned by the owners of those teams, they've traditionally been a little bit more, with more of a homer slant than other forms of media. But in this case, it'll be certainly something to watch because it is a more interesting situation with, Ted Leonsis' Monumental Sports and Entertainment owns these three teams that it's broadcasting games on.
Well, is there precedent for this? I mean, I guess Yes Network in New York is owned by the Yankees.
Yeah.
Like, what's kind of the precedent for this level of control over? And because it's not just the game broadcast, Scott. Like, there's not another local regional sports net in New York. There's SNY. There's Yes. Like there's and the way New York operates, everyone wants to be mad at the team anyway. But like in DC, it's NBC Sports Washington, soon to be Monumental Sports Network. And that's the only like local regional sports TV game in town. Yeah. So like, what does that mean for, kind of the media ecosystem and what precedent do we have for it?
Yeah. In terms of number of teams under the control, I don't know that there is precedent. You mentioned Yes Network, and that's what immediately came to mind when the purchase was completed last August. I think, kind of getting to your question, some more fallout of this is in terms of what teams Monumental Sports Network is choosing to cover. I think it was no secret from the start that they were going to invest more in the teams that they own, and they've done that. I mean, we've already seen, as I mentioned in the piece today, and my colleague Ben Strauss had reported about a few months ago, the Commanders coverage on NBCSportsWashington.com had basically faded completely away. And we find that the team didn't reach a deal with Monumental to continue pregame and postgame coverage this year. I think that's going to be really interesting to see whether. I mean, Zach Leonsis told me ahead of this story coming out that they have no plans for a football-focused show. I mean, which seems silly for any network to ignore talking about the NFL and specifically a local network talking about the local NFL team. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch in the next few months when the Commanders sale is finalized, if some sort of deal can be reached where the Commanders will again have a presence on the network as they had for years when it was, Comcast Sportsnet, then NBC Sports Washington.
Scott Allen at Washington Post with us here on the Team 980. All right, time for the incestuous question, Scott. The Junkies are still going to be simulcast, and of course now they're the morning show not only on 106.7 The Fan, our Odyssey brethren, but on this station as well with the simulcast. This might be a better question for my bosses, but like, what does it mean for them? And that relationship is kind of the one entity that is independent, not something that is produced by Monumental.
Yeah, that was one of my main questions for Zach and him talking about sort of this original programming that was going to fill, the time before games and, what it used to be used for infomercials. And obviously the Junkies, that's a long time slot in the mornings that I was curious if it was going to continue once the rebrand takes effect in September. And he said it is. And then also, I guess, news that is pertinent to you and Commanders fans out there and related to 106.7 The Fan. I asked also about the recently rebranded Beltway football podcast,
right?
Which started at NBC Sports Washington with obviously JP Finlay, Mitch Tischler, and Pete Haley, who really were producing most of the daily Commanders coverage for NBC Sports Washington. And so while there's not going to be a football-focused show broadcast on the network, Zach Leonsis said that the podcast will continue under the Monumental Sports Network umbrella, which again, I mean, I think that just kind of adds to the intrigue over, is Commanders coverage really gone for good on Monumental Sports Network, or is there a chance that it comes back in some form down the road?
Well, there's nothing going on over there. There's no changes in leadership. There's no potential changes in business personnel. So, clearly everything is going to stay status quo forever.
That's right.
There's
that
something
goes for the Nats too, right?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And actually, that's something else. We have your colleague Chelsea Janes on the show today talking about the Masson deal. Like, is that the key that unlocks, the ability to sell the Nationals? Could the Nationals become Ted Leonsis' team or another? There's a lot of obviously things down the road there. When we get to those bridges, we'll cross them and we'll call you back. For right now, though, I one of the more interesting things that I thought came out of your piece and the reporting and kind of their plans that have been unveiled here is the Manning cast type of idea. How do we do a simultaneous broadcast, a second screen, a second option broadcast? What are the plans for those? Like, who's going to be on them? How often they happen? And also, where are they going to air if obviously the main game is going to be on the main station?
Yep. All great questions. And basically what Zach Leonsis said is that the alternate feeds are really going to take effect once this brand new studio opens adjacent to Capital One Arena sometime around the new year, and by which point Monumental Sports Network anticipates announcing more details of their revamped digital platform. I think a lot of today's news is about the programming that's going to be changed and introduced on the linear channel. And from the start, they said they wanted to invest in that linear channel. But I think down the road, more about the greater room for growth and the way that this was headed once the purchase was made was them sort of reimagining their digital platform, which again had launched in 2016 with things like Capital City Go-Go, and you could pay for Mystics games. It was subscription based. But I think we're headed to a point where fans will be able to pay for over-the-top direct-to-consumer Capitals and Wizards games without a cable subscription, which they can't do now. And when you do that on the digital platform, you could have options for these alternate feeds where, as I mentioned in the piece, and Zach talked about a Manning cast style deal where you have, former Bullets and Wizards greats sitting around, and yes, you're ostensibly watching the game, but they're kind of, talking about other things, sharing stories, their thoughts on the team. He estimated that starting not this season, but the following season, roughly 100 games between the Capitals and Wizards would have that alternate feed.
Wow.
And it kind of reminds me of, what the Clippers did. They announced earlier this year something called Clipper Vision. I don't know if you saw this, but basically you could pay, if you're a Clippers fan, you can pay $200 a year. You get access to roughly 70 Clippers broadcasts. You don't get the national broadcast, but included in that access, you can watch the game essentially 6 different ways. You can either just watch the straight broadcast, you can watch a Manning cast style thing, you could watch something called Court Vision that displays augmented reality with like shot probabilities in real time and such. So I would not be surprised if Monumental doesn't roll out something like that. But they weren't prepared to talk about the revamped digital experience yet, but that's where the alternate feed experience would take place.
Scott Allen, Washington Post with us, of course, DC Sports Blog. The big news today, Monumental Sports, rebranding NBC Sports Washington as Monumental Sports Network. And that is September, right, is when that officially switches over?
That's right. Sometime in September. Yep, ahead of the preseasons.
So where does this all go? And like what, I mean, to a point, Scott, I guess the question is like, what's the point of all this? This is obviously a business venture. Ted Leonsis wants to make money. It was very clear at the Wizards intro presser, like he sees himself as the head of this giant conglomerate that includes basketball teams, includes a hockey team, it includes the esports team. Like he sees himself as over kind of this fiefdom, kingdom, whatever word you want to use, to describe this giant collection of assets, including multiple high-level premier professional sports teams, but also a lot of other stuff that he cares about immensely. I'm not trying to say this in any kind of demeaning way. It's just like that it's kind of unprecedented, so I don't really have the words for it. Is the point to make money off of this and it's just a business and like that there's not more to that? Is the point of this to all ultimately build a fan base and hopefully make the Wizards a more attractive place for free agents to help them win championships? Like, how do the pieces interplay here? What is the top line, highest item catch-all point?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think it's cynical to say that the catch-all point is to make more money and
it's a business. More power to them.
Build this thing even greater. I think along the way, it's probably introducing fans of the Capitals and Wizards to these other entities that's part of the MSC network, right?
Should we just start calling it the MSE multiverse? Like, can we own this, Scott? Can you and I come up with the term?
Let's do it. Are we going to care about Wizards District Gaming? We do.
We care about all of it. That's the only way we can actually that it could get credence. I want internal people to be using this term. I want Leonsis to hear it and go, damn it, I wish I thought of that. And then I want him to pay us for it because I also would like to make money.
The MSE multiverse, owners of everyone but the Commanders in DC.
That's the goal anyway. Nationals, they're coming.
I mean, that kind of seems like where it's headed, and I think, kind of echoing what I said earlier, I think a lot of people would see today's news and be like, "What the heck are they investing into a linear channel, an RSN, given how many people are cutting the cord and what's happening with RSNs around sports these days?" But I really think this is kind of a precursor to the greater investment on the digital side and some, pretty great things for cord cutters in terms of finally being able to whether it's maybe you can buy just a season's worth of Capitals games if you're not that into the Wizards. I'm not sure that that's coming, but that seems like certainly a possibility. But yeah, I just think the digital side and what they do with that and the announcements that are to come are kind of where this thing is going.
Yeah. It's so interesting as someone who is, I guess technically I'm a cord cutter. I don't have a cable subscription, but I have Fubo TV. It's just the one that I got, your YouTube TVs, your Hulus, your whatevers. And I had this discussion 2 months ago, I think it was, with John Allerand. And it's like, are we just all headed back to cable? And I think this is a pretty, if we zoom out even more, this could be actually a kind of important inflection point, because if they can create something where you veer away from this vicious circle we seem to be on, where we all got rid of cable and then we're mad that we can't watch all the stuff that we want without a cable subscription and this other thing, and we just wind up paying more for a worse experience. If they can actually make this a better experience, this would seem rather important in the larger landscape of media.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. I mean, I'm one of the people who feels held hostage by Masson, and that I only have cable so that I can watch the Nationals and Orioles every night. It's ridiculous. Because I have streaming subscriptions on top of that out the wazoo. And yeah, I think, I mentioned the Clipper Vision earlier, and a $200 price tag kind of sounds ridiculous, but no one's forcing you to pay it. And if you can go to the diehard Clippers fans, and in this case, the diehard Wizards fans, and say, hey, it's going to be $152 for the season, a lot of people would happily pay it. You make money, they're happy, you're happy, all sorts of, programming options delivered directly to them, people that are fans. I think it's kind of painful right now, but I think we're headed to a better place. And, we'll see how the leagues continue to grapple with this. We just saw the Utah Jazz, take kind of a drastic approach and create their own production company and announce that they're putting games on, Bunny Ears TV starting next year.
Yeah.
So lots of different avenues and things that teams are exploring to try to respond to the changing landscape, and Monumental is right there with them.
I just hope that they run media companies better than media companies have run media companies. Because as someone in the industry, do I necessarily want to work for a team? No, because there is, even if you're told hey, you have carte blanche, you can do whatever you want, it is always in the back of your head that ultimately you might be criticizing the person who signs your check. That is a part, or his most important employee, who's way more important to the company than you. So the idea that all of this is shifting to teams is, I think, ultimately not a good thing. But they've got other revenue streams that media companies don't. Media companies have to make money on media, and Monumental can make money on basketball and then do media. And I just unfortunately don't see I feel like this is a trend that's just going to continue, and it's not one that's necessarily going to, if you agree with the premise that I've put forward here, get better.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think it's something that, something that I and my colleagues, Ben Strauss has written extensively on this, going to continue to watch. And I think there'll be chances to kind of check back in with Monumental Sports Network going forward once this thing does launch and things get rolling this season to see, just kind of what level of involvement there is and what type of editorial oversight there is and how, fans react and, whether it's obvious from tuning into a Wizards or a Capitals game that the game it's being broadcast on is owned and operated by the owner of the teams involved.
Yeah. All right. Last thing, real quick. When you're working on something for later in the week, longest tenured athletes in DC, with Bradley Beal exiting after 11 years. I'm not gonna ask you to give away the whole list. We want people to go get you the click. But what's the most surprising name that came up as you compiled the list? You couldn't believe that guy was that high or that lady was that high on the list.
Let's see. I've got some honorable mentions in here, and I'll mention one of those that I'm surprised has already kind of cracks the top 10 to 15 is Jonathan Allen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's surprising at all to you.
I don't know. I covered John when I was on the beat, and that feels like it was 78 jobs ago for me, even though it was only like 2. So
right.
That one's for personal reasons not as surprising, I guess. But he's still young, so yeah, I guess that's surprising.
I will say the top 3 are Caps. Mm-hmm. Number 4 is Steven Strasburg, and then number 5 is a soccer player, and I think you can probably guess who it is. Debuted on April 14th, 2013.
Oh yeah, that would be Torrey Huster.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Second overall pick, or second round pick, right? It's the second pick of the Spirit in their inaugural year.
Yeah, and she's been here literally ever since. Yeah. No, that's okay. That makes me feel a little bit better because Torrey has I was thinking that we were going to be like top 5, and all of a sudden we were all going to be athletes that debuted in like 2015, 2016. So
thankfully not quite there yet, but
not quite. Okay. All right. Scott Allen, make sure you read that piece later in the week and all the coverage of the Monumental Sports stuff. Really great piece, really interesting quotes from Zach Leonsis. Read it at WashingtonPost.com/sports. Scott, always a pleasure, sir. And I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Absolutely, Craig. Thanks for having me.